So the Knicks are at Atlanta to play the Hawks, at the Wizards, at the Hornets, and at the Timberwolves. Those are the 4 games they have this week. We can talk about them one at a time, or you can just like pick one. But I know you did one of your tremendous threads again on Monday around the NBA with Frank Barrett. And I think that you just did a great job of highlighting things to look for in each of these games. I don't know if you want to start there or start wherever you want.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a bit OCD, so if it were up to me, we'd start with the Atlanta game.
Let's do it.
I think the Atlanta game is really interesting. The Knicks have already beaten them in Atlanta, so they're getting both road games in Atlanta out of the way. I just think it's a really interesting matchup overall, because I think the Knicks are just really tough for Atlanta. They offer solutions to every single one of Atlanta's problems. Like Atlanta comes at you with a 2-guard attack, and DeJounte Murray's been better this season, and Trae Young's honestly, I mean, at some point we're going to have to talk about Trae Young and his shooting, and just at what point is he just not a good? He has the same career 3-point shooting percentage as RJ Barrett. Like, and now I'm not stupid. I understand that all 3-point shooting percentages aren't created equally. One is taking significantly tougher threes and significantly more threes. So I'm not saying that he's been a worse shooter or the same shooter as RJ Barrett in his career, either from an impact standpoint or just who's the better shooter. But there's a pretty large gap in their perceived value as shooters too. And I don't think that's represented by their output, or excuse me, his output. Who cares about RJ? You could do this for anybody who's shooting what they're shooting. Like, I'm just using RJ as an example because I know that'll hit home for Knicks fans who have watched these last 4 seasons. I don't know what Trae Young is as a player if he's not a really good shooter. He's an elite passer. He's got a great floater. And his defense still bad, but he's trying a little bit this season. But I just don't think he's elite if he can't hurt you consistently as a shooter.
I'm glad that you started with that, because during the We Here season for the Knicks, when the Hawks went to the conference finals, prior to that playoff run, I went to war with Atlanta Hawks fans about Trae Young, who all talked about his shooting. I was saying that when the Hawks played Philly, I thought Philly would wipe the floor with them because they were just going to go under screens guarding Trae Young. And that was what I was like, yeah, no, Doc's going to figure it out. Like, Trae Young is not a good shooter. His elite skill is his passing and his vision. That's always been his elite skill. That's what he came into the NBA with his elite skill as. His shooting has always been overrated. Not just the fact that he takes difficult threes, but even on open threes, he's not an amazing shooter. He's had like 1 year where he shot like really, really well on like open threes. And I was just like, yeah, they're just going to go under screens. And it's like, okay, what are you going to do now, Trae? Like, if you're not getting into the paint with a guy behind you that you can like jump stop into, or like get a floater or throw a lob or spray out to the 3-point line, if you're not getting that runway heading into the paint, what are you going to do? But alas, that didn't happen. And everyone goes over screens with Trae Young and tries to force him inside. And it's like, no, you're playing into his hands. So I just am taking this opportunity to say that this has been my calling card about Trae Young for a long time, is his shooting is very inconsistent, and he is 25 now, has played thousands of NBA minutes, and it's not really improving. So I don't know. I think at the same time, I will say I don't think there will be a point when teams don't respect Trae Young's shooting. So kind of like my idea for like, hey, go under screens, this guy's not a good shooter. I don't know that a team is ever going to actually do that. And I just, I think he's still going to be respected. And you and I had like talked about this with regard to other players, where it's like, it doesn't even matter what they shoot. They command respect as shooters, and that's just like what it is. And I think
functional spacing.
functional spacing, yeah, and I think that's just kind of what it is for Trey. So I think he still has that spacing, and he still commands that gravity, but I do think it really limits his upside. At the same time, just with regard to this matchup for the Knicks, I agree. I think they have a lot of answers for what the Hawks have to offer. I think before that game, the first game, I wouldn't say I wasn't high on Jalen Johnson. I just didn't know much about him. Like I would say, like I just kind of have seen him in passing. He didn't play a ton of minutes. I think he played like 15 minutes a game last year or something like that. Very low usage player. So I didn't see like a ton from him. And I knew he shot like 25% from three on like low volume. So I'm just like, okay. And he also shot like, I think like 60% from the free throw line. So I'm like, this guy's not spacing the floor. I don't know how he can play in a lineup with like DeJounte Murray, Clint Capella, and Trae Young. Like this is a non-shooting, like, your best shooter is DeAndre Hunter, who shoots probably like 35% for like league average from three. So in my eyes, I'm like, I don't even see how that lineup can work. Like you have to play AJ Griffin, you have to play Sadiq Bey to have any chance of surrounding Trae with shooters. But this year, Jalen Johnson is shooting around 35%, and he does almost everything else extremely well on both offense and defense. Like he's a pretty good rebounder. He impressed me so much with his defense against the Knicks. His defense against stronger guys like Julius Randle, his defense against quicker guys like Jalen Brunson, crafty guys like Jalen Brunson. So I think he's a difference maker, and I think he seems to be coming into his own. He's now up to 30 minutes per game after playing like 15 minutes per game last year. So I think he's a difference maker. And we talked about the one thing we talked about last time previewing the game. I mentioned like Capella as a potential problem for Mitchell Robinson, not a problem that he couldn't overcome, but it's a potential problem for Mitchell Robinson. And we didn't see that come into fruition last game. I think with Jalen Johnson kind of having this new role and really coming into his own, I think it is going to make it more difficult on the boards for the Knicks. The Hawks are now, I don't know if this is updated with like the most recent data, but they're 6th in offense in the NBA and 4th in offensive rebounding in the NBA. And they're also 12th in defensive rebounding. So I thought they were a little higher in defensive rebounding, but I do think that this is going to be a difficult matchup for the Knicks. I think that the Knicks will win the game, but at the same time, I think we'll need RJ Barrett to play at the kind of level that he's been playing to really feel confident about it. Because as we saw tonight, without RJ or without this version of RJ, they're going to struggle a little bit more than they have in the past. In past years where it seemed like they would be better potentially without RJ on the court, I think they need this kind of full strength RJ unless Randall has a renaissance and is rejuvenated. So that's kind of what I'm looking at for the Hawks game.
Yeah, really good point about attacking the offensive glass. I'm actually surprised teams don't do it against the Knicks more, for a couple of reasons. As much as Tibbs talks about it every year, the Knicks don't hurt you in transition off the boards. They don't push it enough. They don't have, nobody has LeBron, but they just don't have that singular guy who's going to get a rebound and go as much as they try. Like Quickly and RJ try really hard. Sometimes Randall will grab a rebound and push it, have a push ahead pass. But for the most part, if you get caught, behind the play, the Knicks are going to let you recover more often than not. And then the second reason I'm surprised that opponents don't attack the offensive glass more is because outside of Mitch, the Knicks are a terrible box out team, especially the guys who play lots of minutes. And like if Jalen Johnson, who Randall will probably be his primary assignment, every single time a guy who isn't Jalen Johnson shoots, Randall's just going to turn, stand, and watch the ball. And if you're Jalen Johnson, you can scoot around him so easily. You see it happen all the time. So it's not even really about Capella. I trust Mitch to find Capella and take him off the offensive glass, do the best he can. Capella's crafty, So like sometimes he's just going to spot an angle and get around Mitch, but for the most part, I don't think any offensive rebound that Capella gets is due to Mitch being like lazy or bad. I think it's just, oh, there was a weird angle or a weird carom off the offensive glass. I could see DeJounte Murray or Jalen Johnson exploiting Jalen Brunson and Julius Randle just standing and watching the ball. I think that's an area opponents should look to attack the Knicks. And I think that's a great point that you made, bring it up, because I do think that could be an issue. I have a question for you, because you brought up the shooting. You were like, oh, how could this spacing work? And I agree with you. If DeAndre Hunter is your best spacer, that in general, like that's less shooting than you want. But do you think it's possible that you can overvalue shooting due to your perspective as a Knicks fan? And what I mean by that is, like, the Knicks have basically created a paradigm where their whole offense is very basic. It's read and react. It's create advantages and kick, drive and kick, or make the layup, you know? And so inherently, the better shooters you have on the court, there's a perfect correlation, or it is, the better the shooting, the better that offense is going to be, because there's more space but is it possible that in an offense that's a little bit more creative, that shooting isn't as valuable because there are other things to leverage and there are other ways to create space? Because when I watch a team like the Hawks, who in a vacuum don't have the best shooting and therefore don't have the best gravity in a vacuum, I don't see it really clogged. And I see a lot of movement off the ball and a lot of creative screening and a lot of different things that might mitigate that potential weakness and could cause someone like you to, I don't want to say miss the forest for the trees, but underrate how much space they're operating with due to the pure shooting numbers.
Yeah, I think this is a really good question. It's, if you say, is it possible that I might overrate shooting as a Knicks fan and watcher of Knicks games? I think it's just possible that I would overrate shooting because I think it's the number one most important thing in the game of basketball. So
no, I know. I'm just saying, do you think
yeah.
that perspective is shaped by being a Knicks fan? And
oh, that's interesting. I don't think so. I don't think so. I think that I would have come to that conclusion just based on watching basketball and you know, we share a appreciation for Steph Curry and kind of the way that he impacts the game. And I feel like, you know, in other observations and data, really supports like shooters and shooting being the thing that opens up the court the most. But I think that what you're saying about other ways, kind of like smart screening, movement off ball, like, there's a lot of things you can do to create spacing. I just think it's harder. And I just think it's harder to do consistently. And I think you can generate the same kind of space literally just like by planting someone in a spot, and that's different and it's different and more difficult to do it by doing all of this, like, I don't want to say like contrived, but like kind of doing a lot of other things off the ball. And I think especially if you have guys that not only are not good 3-point shooters, but like also not great like mid-range shooters. So I think if you're a team like the Suns and you have, you know, a bunch of guys who will completely roast you from the mid-range if they have to. First, I think, you know, I do think there's, you know, JJ Redick says this all the time. I do think there's like a math problem there when you have guys pulling up for two constantly. But at the same time, I do think you can generate spacing with like shooting from within the arc, and guys can really do damage that way. I would need to like, in all fairness to your point, I think I would need to like watch games for a team that really doesn't have good shooting on the court or like great spacers, and watch a team that doesn't have great spacers but has a really good offense, like the Atlanta Hawks, for instance, who, you know, I mentioned there are number 6 in the offense in NBA, number 6 in offense in the NBA. And then really just kind of digest that and see what's going on, see how they're creating spacing, and see if it's really a matter of like the talent of their players. A guy like Trae Young who can be like a unique talent who can kind of produce and generate offense despite maybe a lack of spacing around him, or if it's a matter of other things that they're doing. It's just like something I would lead to like dive into and like really like cut apart in terms of like my film watching. But of course I think it's possible, and I think if there's anything I'm like have a bias towards in basketball, it is shooting. It is spacing. I think it's like I said, I think it's the number one most important thing in the game. I value guys who generate gravity more than I do any other type of kind of latent skill that somebody else can bring to the game. So yeah, I this is a long-winded way of saying like I definitely am biased towards shooting. I don't think it's because I'm a Knicks fan particularly, but I think it's just because of other things I've observed and some of the data that leads me in that direction. But I think I'm absolutely open to the idea that you can generate spacing through other means besides like shooting. And it seems like the Hawks are doing that, because although obviously they have Bogdanovich who shoots really well, AJ Griffin who shoots really well, Bey who's shooting really well this year, in their starting lineup, they don't have much shooting, and I don't know how that's an effective starting lineup. So
one area we seem to very strongly disagree on, or something you just said that I disagree with you, is that good shooters will always create more space. I think, I forget if it was on pod or off pod when you told me your theory about centers not being a thing anymore in the next 10 years or something. Was that on stream? Was that
was off pod, but I've talked about it with other people off pod too. I'm happy for that to be out and open. My theory is that in 10 years from now, centers or 5 men will essentially all be able to shoot, and those who can't shoot will be out of the league. That's my theory.
I think that we're also moving towards shooters who can't movement shoot being extinct. Like, I don't think Steve Novak even Steve Novak shooting 40 to 45% from 3, I don't think he would be a rotation player in the NBA today. I don't think he could. I don't think.
And
he
you're
could
saying
be.
Not because of his defense. You're saying because it doesn't.
At the highest level, like I feel about Steve Novak the way I feel about Hauser, kind of. But I think Hauser's actually better than Steve Novak because I think he can shoot on the move a little bit. But still, I don't think that a good team or a really good team will let. I just think there are too many players these days who can help and recover at an elite rate. And if 3-and-D needs to become 3 and attack closeouts and D. Because if your only skill is standstill shooting, you just aren't going to be able to get shots off in today's NBA. Teams are too smart, they're too prepared, and the athletes are too good.
I wouldn't disagree with that. I think that that's a fair take, but I guess I'm trying to see how it meshes or disagrees with the center take.
It has nothing to do with the center take. I was just using. No, okay. I was just using that as an example.
I was trying to figure out how it fit.
No, you're
okay. I got
you're
you.
Good. I was just using that as an example of like, this is my my center take. Yeah, my center take is that shooters who can't do anything else offensively, who can't attack closeouts or anything, are just standstill shooters, are basically going to become extinct.
Got it. Yeah. I think that makes sense, and I hear that point. I think that it's different if everybody can shoot, right? Like, I think movement shooting is more important to the team if you have a non-shooter in the lineup, right? I think if everybody can shoot, I think it becomes a less valuable attribute, basically. So if you look at the Celtics situation, for instance, if all those guys are just like 40% catch and shoot, 3-point shooters, 40 plus, like, I don't think they need to have movement shooters, like, because they all can shoot. Like, I think you just have Tatum go to work one-on-one, and I don't think guys are going to be able to stunt and recover, or anything like to keep up with the ball moving around. To each individual guy who touches it could potentially shoot 40 to 45% on an open 3-point shot. I just don't think you can don't think the defense can recover from that kind of scenario. Now, if you have a non-shooter, I think you can. I think you do need more movement. Shooting becomes even more critical because there are ways that the team can kind of shy away or shade the defense away from that non-shooter or poor shooter. So I think it changes things. I think if you have 5 shooters, and my vision, like, and if anybody's interested in this, my vision for the NBA in 10 years is that, and if I had a team, this is what I would do now. I would have guys 1 through 12 be good enough, like average NBA shooters. So like even my bench bigs, my third big, my Jericho Sims would be able to shoot like 35% from 3. That's what I would imagine. And actually it made me think about this because you asked if it's kind of coded my view being a Knicks fan about like 3-point shooting being important. I've loved 3-point shooting since I played basketball video games, and it actually started for me with NBA Live 2004, which was before the 2K days, folks. So I was, NBA Live was the 2K before 2K, and I remember I used to play with the Seattle Supersonics, and I loved that squad because they could all shoot. And one of the main reasons I played with that team was because of Vladimir Radmanovic, who I played as my center, who was a really good shooter. And I think
so you went with Ridnour, Allen, Rashard Lewis, Radmanovic. Who was the 5th?
Yes. I think it was Flip Murray. It might have been or some random guard who could also shoot okay. But yes, Ridnour was my guy. You said the exact lineup. So the fact that they have Rashard Lewis and Radmanovic at the 4-5, that was and we just. I'm saying we just bombed threes that season. Like every shot was a 3. It was all like penetrate and kick out to great shooters, and we dominated the league. We dominated it, and that I don't know if that was like the start. Yeah, I know. We dominated the league.
Were you an actual NBA fan back then? I assume you were.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Any chance you remember the Suns Sonics game from that season? The first Steve Nash season?
My memory is terrible. I won't remember a specific game from that time. But
so the Suns and Sonics played a game in the 04-05 season, triple overtime that ended like 161 to 160 with Ray Allen hitting Steve Nash hit a shot with like 0.9 seconds left to put the Suns up 2. And then Ray Allen hit a buzzer beater 3 to walk off and win 161 to 160 in triple overtime. And 15-year-old me who didn't love the NBA, I was like a big baseball guy. I played baseball.
Yeah.
Big golf guy, huge football guy. Obviously, I like the NBA, but I was probably one of those nerds who was like, "Oh, college is better than the NBA. They play that." I just turned that game on, and like I was encapsulated. It was to this day one of the best regular season games I've ever watched in my entire life.
That's awesome. I literally may go back and watch that game because that sounds like it would be so much fun to watch. I obviously love Nash, and both of those offenses would be so like cool to watch with the current context. So that seems like a game I would go. You got to send me that after the pod.
Yeah, man. Ray Allen, one of the most underrated players ever. Like I feel like he was the perception of him was hurt by going to 2 big winning franchises.
Yep.
No, all right, what I'm saying isn't making sense.
No, it's making sense to me. Yeah.
Everybody only viewed him as a shooter, and they forgot.
He was so good off the dribble, at the mid-range, like attacking the basket. He would draw fouls. Like he was one of my favorite players back then.
Nobody remembers that in the 01 season, the Iverson MVP season, the Bucks took Philly to 7 games in the Eastern Conference Finals, and Allen like outplayed Iverson, and the refs basically that was the big corruption year or the big corruption era. The Donaghy game was, the Kings Lakers game 6 was 2002, and everybody after the 2002 Western Conference Finals, everybody's huge conspiracy is that basically the league needed Philly in that finals because everybody knew the Lakers were going to win, and they just needed a big name like Allen Iverson in the finals. And if you look at the free throw discrepancy, it's ridiculous. But yeah, Ray Allen was unbelievable for the Bucks, unbelievable for the Sonics, and hey, really good player obviously for Boston and for the Heat. He was just more of a shooter, and so I think that has shaded the perception of him, and people have forgotten how overall great he was.
For sure. Yeah, totally agree with that. Um, let's talk about the Wizards because the Knicks haven't played the Wizards yet, and you know, I shout out to my guy Mensa, big dog. I call Mensa's the goat, right? He he was a little higher on the Wizards than I think most of us others were, and it's not looking so hot right now. Anything is in specific that say, and I want to say, like, I don't think the roster is. I think they have some talent on the roster. I don't think it's as bad as like other people think. So I'm not like one of these guys that's like, wow, this is the worst team ever assembled or whatever it is that people are like hyperbolic thing that people are saying, because I think Avdia is good. I think Kispert is going to be pretty good. I don't think Kuzma is like the worst player in the world. Obviously, I don't think he's great or anything like that. I'm higher on Jordan Poole than you are. You know, Tyus Jones is okay. And even Muscala in like spot minutes is like pretty good. And you did a thread and you talked about Bilal Coulibaly, and I think he's going to be a good player. I think he's 19 years old, so I think he's going to be a good player moving forward. So I don't think this is like a trash bag team or anything like that, but they're not going to win many games. So I don't know if there's anything that you want to say about that matchup.
So I have two things to say. One, I don't know Mensa personally. We've interacted on the timeline a little bit. Seems like a really cool guy. I
He's
like
the best,
the idea. Yeah. I like the idea of him listening to this to support us, hearing us give Andrew a shout out, like a positive shout out. And then he stumbles to this point, and you're like, shout out Mensa, and you're just shitting on him. Like, it's so ridiculous.
Mensa's the best, man. He'll understand. He's not gonna take it. He's not gonna take it. It is funny to think about, though. Mensa's the GOAT, man. He knows that.
I've said my piece on Jordan Poole. I don't need to say more about Jordan Poole. I don't think highly of him as a basketball player. The clip that went viral today of Jordan Poole is literally one of the least surprising things to me in the world. I don't know if you saw that, but do you know what I'm talking about?
No, tell me about it. Wait, the last viral Jordan Poole clip was the one where he turned his back on Kristaps and then dribbled behind his back and like lazily went out to the three and got blocked. That was so cool. That was hilarious.
That makes me like him more. That's God levels of confidence right there. Like, to be able to rebound from that is, man, no, this one is some guy some person has been videotaping Jordan Poole in the huddle, and then made a compilation video of Jordan Poole in the huddle just not paying attention. So like they have all these clips of like the coach drawing up plays or people trying to talk to him and him just not giving a shit at all and just being super confused. Like he doesn't know what any of the plays are, and like he's just not paying attention at all.
Oh man,
that's so cool awesome to me that he's
that's awesome.
I agree.
Like, damn, that's cool.
But if I was a Wizards fan, that would, I mean, everybody listening to this just heard me talk about Julius Randle. Julius Randle is 1,000 times better than Jordan Poole is. So like, I can't even imagine what I'd be saying if I was a Wizards fan. Speaking of cool, Bilal Coulibaly is awesome. You said he's gonna be good. You say he's gonna be good one day, dude. He played 33 minutes tonight. Like, the Wizards have already figured out he's good. He played 33 minutes tonight. He had 4 stocks. He had 7 rebounds, 3 assists. He's shooting over 40% from 3, 10 points on 4 of 7 shooting. Like, I don't mean he's like actually. Yeah, I mean, like, he's obviously not. You know what I'm saying? We speak
Sean Marion. Is that what you're saying he is?
Yes, he's already Sean Marion. He's the modern Matrix, the French Matrix. No, he's really cool. If I was a Wizard fan, he would definitely be the person that I would just latch on, because I mean, I already have a bias towards French, young French guys who can do everything. Unfortunately, the Knicks version did not pan out, but hopefully the Wizards' sake, it does. This is not the Hornets. And you made the point. I mean, in a vacuum, Kuzma, Avdia, Gafford, Jones, Poole, Kispert, Coulibaly. These are NBA players. Yeah. They can. The Knicks aren't just going to be able to show up and win this game. They have to play well. I don't care that they're 2-8. It actually wouldn't surprise me. I don't know what Mensa's prediction was. Like, did he think they were going to be in the playoffs, or what
No,
was his
I think
prediction?
I forgot what he had. He might have had him as like 12th in the or 11th in the
Oh,
East, something like that. And like he just his big thing was that they'd be better than the Pacers, I think.
ooh. Okay, well, I would not have been on board with that, but I was very high on the Pacers.
Yeah.
But it wouldn't surprise me if they end up distancing themselves from the actual bottom feeders, um, the Pistons and the Hornets. I just think there's too much talent on this roster. So yeah, I think from a Knicks perspective, they have to play well. Um, I do think that they're going to score at will. I think this is going to be a game to help the Knicks offensive stats. I think they'll be able to get
For
whatever,
sure.
pretty much whatever
For
they want.
sure. Yeah.
I think Gafford is kind of underrated at this point. I think he's another one who could give Mitch some issues just because he's kind of an annoyance. He's a good rim protector. He attacks the boards on both ends. Just a good player. I think Mitch will ultimately win that battle, but it's just, again, I just don't think he can show up and win.
Did you think Mark Williams was going to give Mitch trouble?
Not really. I just think it's kind of different. I think Gafford's a bit more seasoned, um, whereas I think Mark Williams is just very young and raw. And I know he's good, and I know he's already better than Gafford. I just think the things that Mark Williams does well right now, Mitch is going to take care of. Whereas I think Gafford might be a little bit peskier in the direct matchup.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I also covered Mark Williams. I know we're going to talk about the Hornets soon. He's a way better.
We should talk
This
about
is
the
my
Hornets
favorite.
right now. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
this is my favorite thing about doing this weekly segment is, it's really hard to watch a ton of NBA, especially the Hornets. For me, I can't watch them until 3 days after because of the NBA. It's
To
really
clarify for
fun.
the audience, you live too close to the
Yeah,
regional
I live
broadcast network.
right. I can't watch Hawks or Hornets games because I live in South Carolina. I really love just discovering new things. I just love the NBA so much. So I thought it was really cool to because this is the second time I'm covering the Hornets. The first week I covered them, I talked about Gordon Hayward and I talked about his scoring inside the arc. And I was like, okay, this is a really bad team. And now Brandon Miller's hurt. So I don't know what I'm going to cover. And then I noticed this. I was like, this has to be an outlier. But I noticed as I was looking through their on off data that the Hornets assist 10% more often when Mark Williams is on the court than off the court. And I was just like, how can a center have that much impact? Like, you can't. Like, why would they play? And it's probably just noise. The sample size is really small. But whether it's noise or not, I stumbled into Mark Williams passing highlights and I was like, holy shit, this dude can pass on the short roll. He is an elite processor already. The pass and he matches it with skill as a passer. That's something that could give the Knicks issues. It really is. If the Hornets lean into it more because of Mitch and drop, or if they are trying to cover for Brunson, they'll have him be high at the level. If Mark Williams can get the ball on the catch and get downhill a little bit, with how aggressive the Knicks stunt from the weak side, Mark Williams can make that pass. And I expect the Hornets to create more open looks than they did the first time if they get Mark Williams more involved. So, you asked the question, do I think he's going to bother Mitch on the glass more than Daniel Gafford? I don't. But I do think that overall, Mark Williams can be more effective against the Knicks than Gafford can, due to reasons that don't really have anything to do with Mitch and more to do with the overall scheme.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I also love that you're doing the kind of around the NBA segment because, and especially when we play the Hornets twice, and it's just like, what else am I going to talk about the Hornets? And then you kind of discover nuggets like that because I had no idea that Williams passing was anywhere near that level at this point. I don't know if, would you say they kind of feature him in that role very often, like kind of get him the ball in the short roll very, very frequently? Because I know his like for instance, his assist percentage is not like particularly high. So
It's
I
not, but it's double what it was last season. So
yeah,
they're
yeah.
at least trying. Either he's running really hot on the passes he's making,
Hmm.
or they're trying to feature him a bit more. One of the two.
Yeah. So I think that's really cool, and I also think what else I think is cool is that the Knicks are gonna get another blowout victory against this team. I don't really see what the Hornets are gonna do to, and especially if Brandon Miller is out, who looked phenomenal in the early on in the game against the Knicks, and I actually think like
He will be playing. FYI.
he will be playing. Okay,
Yeah,
well
he's probable for their next game.
got it. Okay, probable for the next game. Definitely going to be playing in the next game. I think Brandon Miller is good. I think he's like good already, and I mean we've seen kind of streaky shooting from him so far, but he already did have stretches where he was shooting like really well. And I think he can get to kind of anywhere he wants. And I didn't realize how good an athlete he was. I don't watch very much college basketball, but he's a tremendous athlete. I think he's going to be a really positive impact player. And I think we saw a little, spurts of that in the Knicks game before he got injured. At the same time, I don't think he's going to change their fate. Their defense is just not good, and I think that coming off of the Wizards game, they'll have gotten their mojo flowing, scoring wise. I think that they'll just like continue that along that path in the Hornets game. So I don't have a ton to say about it. I mean, we talked about them before, and you covered a lot of with your Nuggets. And actually, we play the Hornets for some reason once a week, and so they'll be playing the Hornets again the following week, I think. So we'll probably talk a little bit more about them. I don't know what your what your insight is going to be at that point. You'll probably be talking about Nick Richards or Leaky Black at some point. I'm not even sure.
There's another option. The other French player he could be back.
Oh,
Did you know Frank's on the Hornets?
No, I know he's on the Hornets, but is he?
He's not gonna be back. He like broke his leg.
Okay, yeah, I didn't know what his injury was. I didn't know what his injury was. Yeah, he like broke you confused me because I was like, he's gonna be back. What?
Yeah.
Yeah,
he's always back in my heart, XJ.
Let's talk about the last team before we wrap up. I definitely want to put a bow on that episode soon, but like let's talk about the last team that the Knicks are going to be playing. The Minnesota Timberwolves, the defensive juggernaut that is the Minnesota Timberwolves. I've gotten to watch a little bit of Minnesota basketball. Obviously, we're seeing a lot of amazing highlights from Anthony Edwards, but this team is so much more than Anthony Edwards. I think he has played really well defensively, but they have a lot of great defensive players. Jaden McDaniels is excellent, shooting the freaking lights out whenever he's open, and they're doing all of this without getting much from Towns by way of efficiency or effectiveness. Gobert is back to roaming the paint the way that we've always known him to earlier in his career. So I think this is going to be a tough game. This is going to be the 5th game in a row on the road, playing in Minnesota after playing against 2 awful defenses that they're going to have their way against, running up against this team that I think whose defense I believe is very much legit. They even have Shake Milton there, who's a really good defender. Kyle Anderson, who's a really good defender. Naz Reid, I think, has made improvements this year and is also shooting the lights out. So I don't know. I think this is going to be a super tough test, and I'm just curious your thoughts on the Timberwolves game.
So I have a fortunate perspective because I watched the entire Warriors Timberwolves game live. I forget if it was last night or the night before. I think it was last night. In that game, there was one of the coolest plays that I can recall this season. And that was a play where I don't know what the action's called, but I think everybody who's an NBA fan can picture it. It's where the Warriors have Steph and Clay both off the ball screening for each other. And you don't know who's going to do what. It's basically entirely improv, but they've mastered it. But basically one slips to the basket and the other pops around another screen waiting for it. And they just get a good look out of it all the time. And somehow the Timberwolves ended up with, because of like, I forget if it was a cross match or if it was like in transition, or if it was just they switched so much the matchups got completely screwed. But Karl Anthony Towns and Rudy Gobert were the two guarding those two off the ball. It was wild. And Clay and Steph spent about 10 seconds like running circles around each other trying to create an opening. And Towns and Gobert stayed with him the entire time. And they stopped the ball, or they got a stop on the possession. And I just remember thinking to myself, like, okay, I think this defense is for real, because we know Conley, Edwards, McDaniels, and Gobert are good defenders. But if my whole thing about Karl Anthony Towns has always been like, he's not a power forward. It can't work. He's not fast enough to chase guys around the perimeter. He's not committed enough to consistently do it on a possession to possession basis. And when I saw that possession, I was just like, I know it's just a single possession, but that took commitment and effort and stuff that I wasn't ready to associate with Karl Anthony Towns. They love having McDaniels guard the smaller guy. It wouldn't surprise me at all if they stuck McDaniels on Brunson. That I actually think Brunson is fine with, like, when he plays the Raptors, he always does fine. I think McDaniels is a different challenge because he's not someone that Brunson's going to be able to just dust. Well, excuse me. I mean this relatively. Of course, Brunson's going to win the battle plenty because he's so skilled and he's just a master of his craft. But just overall, I don't think that he's just going to be consistently dusting him like he would other guys McDaniels' size. I think McDaniels is going to present a problem. And then they offer everything that you get to the rim. They have multiple rim protectors. You know, Julius Randle can't play bully ball against their bigs. RJ Barrett's not going to be able to live in the paint. He's going to have to keep showcasing the second and third level efficiency that he has so far this season. All these different things cause exactly what I was saying about the Hawks, how the Knicks have answers to all their questions. I think the Timberwolves have answers to a lot of the Knicks' questions, or to the problems that the Knicks try to offer opposing teams. I just don't think it's a great matchup. I don't love our defenders against Edwards. Like, I don't think Grimes is big enough. I don't think Hart is fast enough. I think Edwards is I think it's going to put a lot of pressure on Mitchell Robinson. I think Conley, Towns, and McDaniels will all make shots when they're open. I think Rudy Gobert is going to attack the offensive glass. Like, I just think they're a good team that, again, their strengths correlate with the Knicks' weaknesses. And, forget the Knicks for a second. I just think they're a good team in the macro. Like, I don't know if they can win a championship this year. I think there's a limit to what you can do with Karl Anthony Towns at power forward. I still believe that that's going to be a long-term issue. But I believe in this team to a certain extent. I believe in Chris Finch, the coach. I'll still never forget a game that I saw the Raptors and Timberwolves play last season that ended up going into overtime. And I remember it very specifically because it was while Knicks Twitter was in one of their many yearly civil wars over end of game scenarios. And there was one side arguing, well, every team ISOs at the end of games, so it doesn't really matter that the Knicks get stagnant at the end of games. And then there was the other side being like, whatever the polar opposite of that is, like, we need to run more plays and yada, yada. And that game just blew me away because not only did the Raptors nor Timberwolves isolate at the end of this game, they actually leaned into more plays and they were running all this team-friendly offense. I believe in Chris Finch's ability to draw up plays and design a defense. I just think this is a good team. And yeah, if they stay healthy, watch out for the Timberwolves.
Yeah, you definitely had an unfortunate perspective, which I wholeheartedly agree with. The one thing I would say that I'm not sure is legitimate about the Timberwolves, teams are currently shooting, I think, like 31 or 32% from three against them. I think that's noise. I don't think that's going to hold up. I don't think you can just, most teams in most situations, I don't think you can just hold teams to 32% shooting from three. I think that that's more like shooting luck that they're recipients of. So that's the only thing that makes me feel like, okay, it's not like this is the best team in the league or something like that. Like this is not Boston to me. I think that Minnesota, I do believe, despite what you said about Towns' defense in that scenario, and I think Towns has been a little better defensively this year. Maybe he's giving more effort because he's not scoring at the clip that he's used to. But I do think that's going to hold them back. And I do think that the defense is going to kind of come back down to earth a little bit because I think it's being buoyed by the 3-point shooting against them, which is really, really, it's like bottom of the league. I think if I'm right, I think the 32% is the lowest that any team is shooting. Or the lowest that any defense is holding teams to. So I don't think that that's a result of just like great defense. You can just hold teams to 32% from three. So that's the only thing. They're really good defending at the rim. Jaden McDaniels has shown me a ton. Like I've believed in his defense, but I think that I was watching the Warriors game. I forget if that's the one that you told me to tune into. But anyway, there was a Warriors game that I'm not sure, but there was a Warriors game that they were playing against Minnesota, and McDaniel was so impressive. He's so active. He can pick guys up early. He can stay with guys off the dribble. He's very long. He chases around screens. He has some of that hustle that Derek White has around screens where like you think he's in your rear view, you think he's gone, but actually he's still in the play, and he might even block you. Not only is he going to get a rear contest, he might block you from behind. And then his shooting is just like knocked down so far. So I think McDaniels is like really a weapon for them. Again, I think Towns could hold them back, but I don't think the Knicks have the tools to exploit Towns in the way that a team would need to take advantage of it. So the only thing I could say is like I think that the shooting luck is gonna run out for them at some point, and maybe they won't be the best defense in the NBA, but I still think they're a legitimately like top 5 defense. What I would ask you is do you think if Minnesota could flip Towns for 2 lesser pieces, let's say, but ones that fit better with their lineup and their rotation, do you think that could vault them into contender status, or do you think that wouldn't be enough? Do you think Towns is not really holding them back enough for that to make that much of a difference?
Honestly, I think they're already in contender status.
Like championship contender, like legitimate championship contender this year?
That's tough. I mean, Boston and Denver are so good. I almost want to like exclude them.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, Minnesota's played Denver, Boston, and Golden State. They're 3-0 versus those teams. I know it doesn't matter. They absolutely destroyed Denver. They beat them 110-89.
Yeah.
Again, that doesn't. It's one game. I'm not saying that. I think they're closer than most people do think. And yes, I think if you turn Towns into 2 better fitting pieces, I think they're one of the teams that could give Denver or Boston a run for their money. I think they can just do it on both ends. And can we talk about, I don't think it's crazy to say that through the first 10% of the seasons, Anthony Edwards should be mentioned in MVP discussions.
Yeah. Anthony Edwards has increased his assist percentage by 5 percentage points without his turnover percentage moving at all. And he's hitting mid-range shots like at an insane clip for a guy who takes the ones that he does. He's so much better than he was last year.
So the Minnesota Timberwolves defense has been great. It's 10 points worse per 100 when Edwards sits. Okay, that might not be super significant. There's a lot of factors going into that.
He plays a lot with the starters, and the starters
right.
Are really good.
He plays a lot with the starters. But then let's talk about the offense. When Edwards is on the court, the Timberwolves have a team high 116.6 offense rating. When Edwards is off the court, they score 92.5 points per 100 possessions. It's 24 points worse per 100 possessions when Edwards sits. In total, the Timberwolves are 34 points per 100 worse when Edwards sits than when he plays.
That's got to be top 1 percentile in the NBA then.
Yeah, net differential. The only, I've pretty much looked at every team at this point. The only person who I think is close is Tatum, or
Tatum,
who?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, Tatum's up there too. Who, I mean, I think Tatum's in the MVP discussion as well, not just because of that.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at Edwards's just what he's doing across the board, he has a career high true shooting percentage. That's cool. He has a career high usage, but somehow that hasn't hurt his, and a career high assist percentage hasn't hurt his turnover percentage.
Exactly. Yeah.
We are witnessing the Anthony Edwards leap in front of our eyes. And the coolest thing about it is it's not at all helped by random 3-point percentage. He's shooting worse from three than he did last season.
Yep.
But
which is scary. That's a little scary. Like, and we're not going to talk about this today, but I think if we saw the kind of leap from Edwards that, you know, if we saw that in RJ, right? Like him having this insane impact without his 3-point shooting increasing as much, I would feel a lot better about it being like sustainable and like legitimate as far as like long term, like the level that he's reaching. But what we're seeing from Edwards, that's the biggest factor for me, and I'm really glad you brought it up. His 3-point shooting is not up. It, like you said, it's slightly down from last year, but yet his impact has gone through the roof. Everything else that he does on both ends has improved. Like this is a leap to me. This is like what a leap looks like to me. Not, oh, I'm shooting. Again, this is not a slander on RJ. Not, oh, I'm shooting 50% early in the season from three. And that's why, you know, it's ridiculous when I'm on the court. Because if you increase any player's 3-point shooting percentage by 20%, they're going to look like a different player entirely. But if you have the same 3-point shooting percentage and everything else is much better, those things feel more sustainable to me. So I just wanted to interject with that because you brought up that's like a point that I would hammer on.
We're not going to have this whole conversation now, but I do think you're selling other improvements of RJ short.
He's made other improvements. I shouldn't have used it as an example, but my point is he's made other improvements for sure. And I'm not denying that though. I'm just saying like 50% from three is anybody shooting 50% from three with that usage is going to look like an all-world impact player. That doesn't mean that RJ's leap is not real or anything like that necessarily. I'm not saying that, but just like anybody who shoots 50% from three that previously shot 32% from three on that usage is going to look like an amazing all-world player. Pick anyone in the entire NBA and just say this guy has a 25 usage or whatever, and he's shooting 20% higher from three. Like that guy's going to look like an all-star. Any single player.
Yeah. And you do have to, I do think that one thing people aren't, God, we're just having the RJ conversation. I do think that one thing that people aren't factoring in is like, what would anyone, even not the highest person, somebody who's in the 90th percentile of RJ believer, RJ fans, what would they say his overall impact in the league is right now? It has to, the quiet part nobody's talking about is he a top 50 player in the league? I don't mean in a vacuum. I mean with his current impact.
So far this season?
Is he a top 30?
40, 30? Yeah, something like that.
So, okay.
I would say maybe 40. Yeah.
Like you think, so you don't think he'd be an all-star?
I don't think he'd be an all-star, no.
Okay. So
do you think he'd be an all-star?
In a vacuum, I don't think he'd be an all-star. With the Knicks crazies, maybe.
Yeah.
No, but that's kind of worrying. That's the part nobody's talking about. He's shooting 50% from three and not sure he'd be an all-star, you know, like.
Okay. We're kind of just, I don't know why we're sneaking this in at the end of the pod, but we're kind of just doing it. So it is what it is. So, you know, his true shooting right now is 61%, right? And he's scoring 26.4 points per 75 possessions. I like looking at 75 possessions. So, but we're seeing him shoot 50% from three and like 85% from the free throw line. And I threw into a little calculator that Let's say he shot the way he shot last year from three in the free throw line. Last year, he shot 31% from three and 74% from the free throw line. He would be at 52% true shooting, which is actually lower than what he shot last year, and at 22.6 points per 75 possessions compared with his 21.5 points per 75 possessions last year. So obviously, I'm not saying anything that like requires rocket science. I'm saying he'd be less efficient and scoring less if he's shooting lower percentages. But that's really my point. Like, his rebound rate is down. The team has a lower offensive and defensive rebounding rate when he's on the court. His league-wide percentile ranks are the same for defensive rebounding and lower for offensive rebounding last year. He's getting to the free throw line actually less, like it's the second lowest of his career in terms of his free throw rate. His assist percentage is higher because he's definitely passing out of drives much more, and his general decision making are much better. But he's actually driving at a slightly lower rate than he was last year, and passing out of those drives only at a slightly higher rate than he was last year. Like, it's not very much of a difference. He's also shooting a lower percentage on drives than he was last year, 38% versus 47%. So, you know, like, these are just the things that are like worrying about the sustainability of the leap, so to speak, because those other things have not really improved very much. Like, to me, it's like on the back of the shooting. So if you believe in the shooting, if you're like, yeah, this shooting is legit, RJ's going to shoot 81% from the free throw line and 41% from three, then I would say, yes, he's made a leap for sure. But I think any guy or any player that increases their shooting 15% from one year to the next, that they're going to make a leap. Like, that's just the reality of the situation. So that's kind of where I'm at. Not to say it's not a leap or anything like that. I just need to see the sustainability of it for me.
Right. I think there are going to be a lot of people who just turn their brains off after like 10 seconds of hearing what you just said. And don't of hearing how you started, and don't even try to. People need to understand that what you're saying is that if statistically nothing rebounding, passing on drives, finishing at the rim, if none of these things improved, the full backbone of his improvement is dependent on 3-point shooting.
Offensively, but yes.
Offensively, right.
Yeah.
And so for the reaction and the belief to be as overwhelming as it is, you have to buy the shooting. That's your whole point. And historically, 3-point shooting is the flukiest and most volatile thing there is. Like, some people might rebut to you and say, okay, well, how about you put into the calculator what he shot from at the rim last season? You know, you said 38% versus 47%. That's probably going to trickle up. Well, okay, that's not as big of an impact on overall efficiency as 3-point shooting is, and there's not as much noise because they're higher floor shots. They just, it's easier to be what you're shooting at the rim is typically more consistent with what you are than what you're shooting from three. And so what XJ is trying to say for people who are actually open-minded and willing to try to understand it is that you can believe, or I can believe, because I do believe, that RJ's made a leap and that he's improved as a player, but at least try to understand how much weight you have to put on his shooting to believe that. You can't just be like, or you can, but you'd be wrong. But you can't just be like, oh yeah, he's just clearly so much better and so much more well-rounded as a player, because the numbers don't actually back that up. And I think that's what you're trying to say.
Yeah, and I think that's a really helpful kind of summary and clarification, because I know it's necessary. Like, I understand that I come across as like pouring cold water on the RJ kind of celebration, and I'm not saying that I think it's not real. I'm saying I just want to see more before I kind of celebrate along with all of you. And to be clear, I'm a Knicks fan. I want it to be. If RJ shot 45% from three for the rest of his career, I would be ecstatic. That would be amazing. I would love that so much. Like, I would be throwing a party. I'd be in the party with all of you. I'm just concerned that you don't see that type of like change from year to year very often. And I do believe that most of his improvement thus far is contained to within, and the responsibility for it is the shooting. Like Geoff just said, we can expect his shooting percentage on drives to increase. Again, it's down almost 10%. So that gives some room to offset some of the efficiency drop that we might see when his shooting comes down, if and when his shooting comes down. And so we can expect that. But at the same time, if I'm just looking at what he's done so far this year, that puts even more of the burden and responsibility on his positive impact on the shooting, because his shooting percentages on drives are lower. So yeah, that's really where I'm coming from about it. Like, I would love it to be the case, and I hope that the leap is true. But I think at this point, if you believe, hey, RJ's made this leap, this is real, this is sustainable, you have to believe in the shooting, like Geoff just said. And you might believe in the shooting, and I wouldn't argue with you. I'd be like, I hope that that's true. I hope that his shooting is real, and this is a genuine leap. Maybe he's changed something with his form, figured out how to be consistent. I would love that to be the case. But I don't think you can believe in the leap and not believe in the shooting. I don't think you can. Not at
do
this
you
point.
have do you have, and this is great podcasting on the fly here, so the answer might just be no. Do you have the true shooting percentage calculator up in front of you?
No, but I can pull it up. The tricky thing about true shooting is that the components are not shooting percentages; they're like field goal attempts.
Yeah. I've done it before.
Okay, yeah. So I have it up now, though. What's up?
I'll filibuster a little bit, but I am curious if you can in the next couple of minutes figure out what would his true shooting percentage this year be if he shot 80% from the line and 37% from three.
I kind of looked at that already, actually.
Okay.
So it's around 56% would be his true shooting in that situation.
If RJ plateaued at that with what you've seen on the defensive end, would that be encouraging to you from a 23-year-old, or would you be like, we need more because he's the number 3 pick and this team needs more?
No, that would be tremendous. That would be amazing. I would love to. If he shoots I guess my point is, like, when you say a leap, I'm not you, but when someone says a leap and that he's in the all-star conversation, I don't expect that to continue. If he can shoot 37% from 3 and 80% from the free throw line, that would be a leap to me. That would be like, wow, that's really a leap in terms of RJ's like efficiency. Add that with his defense, like you said, his awareness has increased, his decision making has improved, his willingness to pass has improved. I think that that's an amazing player. I would sign up for that RJ. And not only that, I would ship out Randall so that RJ can get more usage and more kind of time on ball. That would be amazing to me. I just don't think he's like an all-star. I don't think he's made the leap that Anthony Edwards has made. And I don't think he's like an all-star,
Yeah. So I think that, unfortunately, this is where you and I are very similar. I think that you almost feel it as your responsibility to push back, because it's not in your nature to emotionally overstate things.
Yes.
You see a lot of Knicks fans getting excited, and that's not immediately off-putting to you. In fact, as a Knicks fan, I'm sure you're like, yeah, this is awesome. Like, Knicks fans being happy is a good thing. But then the conversation becomes so overwhelmingly like, oh, all-star Barrett. And it's like, okay, are we trying to talk basketball here, or are we just, what are we doing here? And so I feel like that is where you're coming from, kind of, maybe.
Yeah, that's probably the root of it. I think really the root of it for me is like, I'm worried about this team because it seems like we're dependent on this like sub all-star level RJ Barrett that I don't know is going to continue for the whole season. And I'm almost like cautioning, like, let's chill out, because I don't think it could be like, yo, we need RJ, so we're like, look at how bad we are without RJ, because the RJ that we've seen, I don't know that is RJ. I think RJ can be much better than he has been so far in his career. And like you said, I could see that as a realistic number. 37% from 3 I think is a totally realistic number for RJ. Even like 79% from the free throw line, something like that. Like I could see him finishing the year at 37% from three, 79% from the free throw line. And that would be a tremendous improvement, and that would be great. And I would love RJ here, and I would love his impact. I think his impact would be great, especially on the defensive end, including the defensive end. But I don't think that would be good for the Knicks. Like if these guys, the rest of the guys are playing the way that they are, Brunson and Randall, and even to a lesser extent like Josh Hart, and DiVincenzo, and that wouldn't be a good scenario for the team. So that's kind of what I'm just trying to like temper the exuberance, or like in my mind at least, I like feel like tempering the exuberance, because it's just troubling. It's just troubling if that's the improvement that we'll see. I think that's great for RJ and for the team, but I don't think it's a good sign if we're so dependent on this level that he's been playing at.
Yeah, I think one thing that you might be underrating a bit is the human element of it. And I do think that it could be good that RJ is experiencing the positive side of variance early, because for better, well, I don't think it's for worse, but some people might. For better or for worse, RJ is ingraining himself as one of the most valuable players on the team. If not, I mean, so far he's been the most valuable player on the team. And if that's the nature of things, it forces the Knicks to ingrain him into the offense and into the system in a way that could be beneficial for him. Because I believe in things like rhythm, I believe in things like confidence and consistency. And in my opinion, even if RJ comes back down to earth as a shooter, which he will, like you just said, it would be pretty unbelievable if he just shot 50% from three for the entire season. It would be amazing, but it would be unprecedented.
Completely
I think
unprecedented.
I think that with how he's playing right now and how he's impacting the game, just the overall impact, I think that he's basically locked himself into 30 to 35 minutes a night. And I think that there just are going to be fewer stretches where he disappears from the offense. And from a personal growth standpoint, I think there's going to be trade-offs to his regression. Like, I think you're thinking too robotically. I think you're basically thinking like, oh, like this output is going to remain the same as this output regresses. But I think that assuming his role remains the same and his importance to the team remains the same, when we see the regression from the three-point shooting happen, I think we're going to see positive regression in other shooting areas inside the arc. And I think that we're going to see him react in a human way to not be like, I think right now, you quoted the passing on drives and assist percentage and stuff like that. It wouldn't surprise me at all if those things go up when the shots stop falling, because I think it's a natural development as a human being to be like, oh, shots aren't going as much. Okay, I'm going to start looking for guys. Like, I think the RJ Barrett we saw last season, who some people are going to say, oh, well, shots weren't falling last season, why wasn't he passing as much then? My answer would be he was very firmly the third option. He didn't have consistency of touches. He didn't have consistency of role. And he is a born scorer. That's what he's been his entire life. So when he got his touches last season, he would say, okay, I'm going to score because that's what I'm going to do. I don't know when my next touch is going to be. My first instinct is going to be a score. With an ingrained RJ into the system, with the full backing of support from his head coach to the team, with them saying, you're the guy, you're number one, number two, consistently. It doesn't matter how you shoot. I think we're going to see natural progression in other areas, even when the shot stops falling to the rate that it is now, or at the rate that it is now.
Yeah, I think those are tremendous points, and I don't have any pushback to them. I think those are great points, and I will say I don't think that I'm necessarily like underrating those aspects. I think that I'm acknowledging that I don't have the ability to project how those will play out. Like, I think that it's too like wishy-washy to me. It's too intangible. It's not. I can't say, okay, well, this is going to happen and this is going to cause this other thing to happen and this is going to cause this other thing to happen and this is what's going to happen. Like, I don't feel like I'm in a position to be able to say that. I can say I could see everything what you just said. I could see absolutely unraveling in that way. Now, what would I benchmark it as, like the percentage chance or the probability things go that way? I can't give you insight there because I don't know RJ. I don't know him like personally. I haven't seen him, really react to adversity, like personally, how he takes things, like who the people are around him. Like, I don't know. Like, there's so many factors to consider, and that's a black box for me. So I'm less willing to like make projections with regard to those factors. At the same time, like I said, I could totally see all of that playing out that way. And as a Knicks fan, I absolutely hope that they do, right? So I hope that they do. And I've been neutral on RJ Barrett for his entire career. I've never been like, he's a bust, he's not good, he sucks, or any of that. But I've also been objective about like, the data and watching the games. He hasn't been like a hugely positive impact player for more than, a few stretches of time across a few seasons. So, we'll see. And all I'm saying is I expect.
I mean, his second season when he ran hot from three, that was a full season of positive impact, right? Because the data liked his defense that season too, right?
Yes, it was positive. Yes, it was positive. It's like
right.
Not
he
like
was the third. He was the third most important player on that team until Mitch got hurt, and then he was the second most important player on that team.
Right, and I, it was positive. It's like in the bell curve, it's like, within the first standard deviation of like positive. You know what I mean? Like, it's not that he wasn't a negative or even neutral player. He's squarely on the positive side, but like, a good player. So anyway, yeah. I mean, what he's been so far is not a good player. It's been like an upper echelon, like we talked about, like potentially top 40, 30 or 40 player in the NBA. So that's like, it's just like fundamentally different from that, what he was in that season, despite shooting 40% for an entire season from three.
So can you just, and then we'll wrap this up after this. Is the entire difference in the 10% from three?
From what?
Because
from what season to for that season?
From his second season to this season.
Oh,
you just said I feel like the whole basis of your point is how much of his leap is predicated on the shooting, which I think I agree with.
No, because his scoring in other places was much worse that season, right? So like, for instance, last year, no matter how, I mean, despite how bad some people think he was overall, like he shot 57% at the rim, which is not good, but in that second season he shot 52% at the rim, like so even though he shot better from three, he was worse in other areas, so it kind of balanced out, it seems like to me.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I also think one reason it's just tough to get people to even try to have an open-minded conversation about these things is people just trust their eyes so much, and I think even though it may not be encaptured by the pure objective output, it just seems so obvious that the RJ Barrett we're watching now is better than the RJ Barrett we were watching last season.
I will say real quick to that, I see that too. I don't trust my eyes. I feel like I'm seeing that too. But I also feel like I'm seeing, you see him come down and hit a three, and then you have this feeling of like, wow, RJ's playing really positive offensive basketball. And then he comes down and drive. Like, I don't think people would have said or would have intuited the stats that I shared, right? Like, if I said he's shooting 10% lower on drives than he was last year, I don't think anybody would have like been like, yeah, I can tell. Like, he's shooting like way worse than he was last year on drive. I don't think anybody would say that. I don't think anybody would say, oh yeah, he's passing, his passing on drives is like literally the same as last year. I think people, if I were just to ask them, if I were to just say, hey, don't look at the stats, I'm going to blind you to the stats. Is his passing, on drives the same or better or worse than last year? I think like 90% of people who watch the games would say it's better. Like, that's why I don't trust my eyes like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but even there, when I've argued about RJ's improved passing on drives, I do agree that it does seem like he's passing more, but I think the reason that bias is created is because the variety of passes is more. I think that's what creates the bias, because if more passes are available to him, that inherently makes him more valuable. If he can only make one or two passes, if he can only make the pocket pass and the cross court one-handed pass that we've seen him make a million times, if that's it for him, then he's limited as a creator, as a primary initiator. But I think we've seen a wider range of passes this year. So I think that's where more reasonable people are coming from when they talk about his improved ability on the drive, passing on the drives, because they've seen variety in his, for lack of a better word or phrase, passing bag.
Yeah, and that's totally fair. And I would say, just watching the games, I believe I'm seeing the same thing. But I think the whole point of using data is to offset potential biases that we might have in terms of what we're watching and how we feel about what we're watching. And to me, like, the emotional reaction to what we're watching creates the bias as well as the actual output that we're seeing. So I might feel really good about how RJ is playing and then try to reverse, like, oh, why do I feel really good about how RJ is playing? Like, it seems like he's passing, like, he has such a wider variety of passes. Like, if I saw that quantified in terms of, like, in some way, like, there's not going to be data for this, but if I saw that quantified and it, like, substantiated that view that I believe that I was seeing, that would make me feel a lot stronger in it. And so that's why I need greater and greater sample size, in order to feel comfortable and confident in, like, what I believe my eyes are showing me.
I will say to anyone who's made it to the end here, when XJ says he doesn't trust his eyes, for 90% of higher than 90, that's the right way to exist objectively. Like, for anything, not even sports, I highly recommend more people not trust their eyes, but not weigh their preconceived notions and their biases. Like, you don't want to, I mean, this is going to sound so nerdy, but the scientific method exists for, the scientific formula, exists for a reason. And there's a reason that drawing conclusions is supposed to come after the research. Like, you're not supposed to have your mind made up about things. The data is supposed to be what puts you over the top. With that being said, when it comes to basketball, I think the optimal way is some combination of eye test and data. And I think that the most reasonable and smartest basketball fans are the ones who can do that, are the ones who know that their eye test isn't the end all be all, but have eyes good enough to lead them in certain directions that the data can kind of complete.
So I'm gonna be a little pedantic here, and just, when you say eye test, I don't think it's great to use, like, eye test with regard to, like, I watched the game last night and then this is my assessment of it. I think it's more like film study than eye test, right? Like, if you watch plays and you dissect them and you see everything that's going on, how that the play, like, see what's happening with the ball, but see what's happening off the ball. You have to, like, for instance, I love how, damn, this is a really long episode. I love how, PFF does their analysis of football players, because what they do is, like, they literally will just, like, watch a single player on a play. Like, they will just look at that player and see what they do and see their impact, whether they're getting the ball or not. Like, let's say they're a receiver, they'll look at the routes that they ran. Even if they don't get the ball, they look at the blocking. They look at how this receiver was blocking in run blocking and run protection, or pass protection if they're protecting a quarterback. They look at all of these things that are happening that we're just watching the game. We're not like, oh look, Jalen Waddle like was had a great block as he was going out for his route, or interfered with the defensive back as he was going out of his route in a subtle way that got Tyreek open. Like, we're not looking at that. You can't perceive all of that just by watching the game. You have to look back at film, and you have to see all of the minutia that is happening. I don't think you can just perceive that. No one's watching a game and can perceive all 10 guys on the court at one time and like everything that's happening. So I don't believe in eye test, even insofar as like I watched the game and I have this assessment. I looked at the data and I put those two together. Like, I think you have to be someone who's like, studying film, so to speak, like that's kind of what I think.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the funniest thing about that is that all of the eye test guys who always shit on analytics are always like, oh, we got another spreadsheet watcher. Like, they always say that. And it's like, oh, you don't watch the game on a computer. And it's like, genuine question for those people. Do they think that the people who take the time to research and study and learn about the advanced analytics of a game that will never have anything to do with it, do they think that those people don't watch the games? Do they think like it's one of the, like it's just so confusing to me, because I would bet that I have watched as many NBA games as 99% of people, more, or as many NBA games as 99% of people who aren't paid to do so in the last 5-10 years. And so that's always the most confusing thing to me, is like, it's always, and we've talked about this off air, it's always so befuddling to me that the most ignorant are the most confident. Like, there is such a strong correlation between certainty in your preconceived notions and ignorance. And they always say the same things. They just always say stuff like that. And I'm just like, oh, I can't help that person, so there's no point. Like, this is where you and I are completely different. You're talking about how you get into it sometimes with people in Twitter threads or YouTube comments. Like, I gotta be honest, dude, 90% of the posts I make, when I make the post, I mute them and I don't go back to them. I've said my piece and I don't, and it's not because like it sucks, because there are so many people out there. Like, I don't know, it would bum me out if I had never met you or never like talked to you, because I have such high respect for what you have to say. And like, if you say something, I'm like, okay, like I have to make sure that I'm thinking and like I'm understanding what you're saying. And there's so many other people like that. There's so many intelligent people. But I've just found that if I let myself even trickle down the rabbit hole of reading what other people have to say, I could go on forever battling with people who will never, ever respect what I have to say, never have an open mind. It's just pointless to me. So I just mute the thread and I just move on with my life. And that's just, it's sad that I have to do it, but that's what I do.
I fully hear that, and I feel that way a lot of the time as well. Um, I I hope that for every 9 people who are kind of closed off to a different perspective, that maybe informed more by data or informed more by, like, in my case, I work as a researcher and a behavioral scientist, so like that's a lot of my views are based in knowing the extent of and the role that bias plays in our just perception of everyday life, as well as the role that noise can play and the difference between bias and noise, with regard to bias being consistently perceiving things in a incorrect or inaccurate way, and noise being perceiving things in different ways in different situations without like a consistency but still being inaccurate. So I'm just like aware of those factors, and I think that is why when I say, and I'm glad that you pointed this out, when I say I don't trust my eyes, it doesn't mean like I don't know ball, or you'll say, well, yeah, of course he doesn't trust his eyes, he doesn't know ball. Like, that's not what that means at all. It means that I'm aware of the shortcomings of my ability to perceive everything that's happening on the court all at the same time just by watching a game a single time. And to me, that's just a personal awareness that I think if more people had, I think they would kind of be more open to other things that they may not be like perceiving or being aware of, or maybe be revealed in the data, or oversights that they could be having, or biases that they could be experiencing with regard to their analysis of a game or of a player, of anything really in life. So yeah, I that's how, where my perspective is. And I just hope that, like I said, for every 9 people who are not open-minded to it, maybe one will be, and they may, not change, but add to how they view the game, and could add some color or texture, to what they're already perceiving as they view and analyze basketball.
It just kind of bums me out because basketball is so meaningless, but people are like this with real issues,
Yeah, it's worse.
Like
it's worse when it comes to real
right,
issues. Yeah.
Probably even stronger. And it's like, it would be so easy and so much better if people weren't so certain that they were right when 99% don't really have a clue. And it's just, I don't know. I'm not even saying I have a clue. I definitely don't, but I do think that I'm ahead in that I'm aware. And like, I would never have a conversation with somebody and be like, I know I'm right, so I don't even have to listen to what you have to say. And it's just, And then you throw the spreadsheet watcher onto gasoline onto the fire, and it's like, Jesus Christ, man, it's so frustrating. I can't. That one, every single time I see it, I just like, I don't know. I want to do something.
It's hilarious. It's like anyone who, like, I'm sure, like you said, you watch more basketball than like 99% of people who are not like, well, you're kind of paid to watch basketball, but like professionally doing something in basketball is like, I mean, first of all, I would say for you, it's probably greater than 99%. It's like 99.9%, because you watch even more basketball than I do. But I'm sure that literally anybody who's called me a spreadsheet watcher, I watch more basketball than they do. I don't think there's a single person who's ever said that to me, that I don't watch more basketball than they do. So
there's a 100% chance. It's not even close. Like especially if it's on Knicks Twitter. Like,
yeah.
I think you're already ahead if you only count Knicks games. I'd be surprised if those people watch 100% of Knicks games, and it's like, oh my God.
Yeah. Well, we need to wrap up. This has been a marathon episode, but a really fun conversation. If you're still with us at this point, I love you. Like, literally, I don't know, send me a message on Twitter if you're listening to this part, or send me write a YouTube comment, and I will like give you something, because that's amazing. And I was
gonna say we should come up with a code right now, just on the fly. Just anybody for the next week. If you DM me or XJ, both of our direct messages are open. I don't know, come up with a word. What's the theme of this episode? I'm blanking. It's so late right now.
I don't know. We talked.
I got it. DM me or XJ spreadsheet. That's it. One word, spreadsheet. And we will Venmo you $10. Legitimately, if you made it through this whole episode.
Yeah, seriously. I co-sign that.
If it's one person, we'll just Venmo you $10. If it's multiple people, I don't know, we'll do a raffle or something. But
we'll figure it out.
Anybody who the cutoff is. When do you go on vacation, actually?
I go on Wednesday, the 15th. So it's going to be tomorrow from the point that this is dropping.
All right. So you have 24 hours, folks. Anybody who Venmos XJ or I, the word spreadsheet, is eligible to win $10. $10.
Yeah.
So, and we love you, whether you did or didn't reach the end.
I love that. We need to start adding clues for money throughout that, just different points in the pod. Next several episodes, maybe not always at the end, so people don't just fast forward to the end. It could be like right in the middle. Who knows where it's going to turn up, but we're going to financially incentivize you to consume this content. No, this has been super fun. This has been Hot Hand Theory. I love these kinds of conversations. This is why Geoff and I wanted to start the pod. So hopefully, you all are enjoying it as well. And we will see you next time.